Great. Well, it looks like we've got most folks in from the waiting room, so let's go ahead and kick it off. My name is Jessie Herman. I'm an assistant vice president in the Centers for Giving It Foundation for the Carolinas. And I'm so delighted to welcome you all to today's Ask Me Anything with Nonprofit Leaders. This program is part of our nonprofit seminar series, which is housed in the Center for Nonprofit Sustainability, where we work with nonprofits from around the region for fund management services, but also in workshops and trainings like this, and ways to connect our nonprofit community so we can all work together and learn from each other as well. So if you haven't connected with the foundation and are looking to do so, I will be sure to drop my contact information in the chat, and please reach out so you can join us and learn more about the foundation resources. So this program is going to be a lot more informal than probably most that you've participated with in the foundation, because we really want this to be an interactive conversation. So we'll kick it off with just a few introductions of our panel, a couple questions that we'll have to just kind of kick off the conversation, and then we'll ask you to join in. So turn on your mics when we get to that section, ask your questions, and if you prefer, feel free to drop those in the chat box, and we'll be sure to get those questions asked to our panel as well. So to start us off, if I could ask Krista Woolley, if you will just give us 1 to 2 minutes on who you are, how you got where you are, and the work that you're doing now.
Hey, good afternoon. I'm Krista Woolley, Community Care Clinic of Rowan County. It's in Salisbury, North Carolina. There are about 70 free clinics in North Carolina. We're all part of association. Our particular clinic's 25 years old. We offer free medical, dental, and pharmacy services for uninsured adults in our county. We also do dental services for Stanley County residents too. We've been pretty successful in meeting the needs of our community, and we're part of a larger group called Healthy Rowan, where we have really tried to work to improve the health of all Rowan County citizens. And so I'm happy to be here. We've been a part of the foundation for about 7 years, Foundation for the Carolinas, and really appreciate their work. I really appreciate these opportunities. I've been to so many and always found a nugget or 2 or 3, but more importantly, I've found folks to talk to and be colleagues with and to just glean information from. So I'm glad to be here.
Great, thank you so much. And now if I could ask our other Krista to introduce herself.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Krista Terrell. I'm president of the Arts and Science Council. We are the local arts agency for the city of Charlotte as well as Mecklenburg County. And ASC focuses on investing in the people, programs, and ideas that move us toward a more equitable, sustainable, and creative ecosystem. Cultural equity is a key focus of our work. And we are committed to that. And how I got to kind of where I am is really by being attentive, knowing about the sector, learning about the sector and how it works. Thank you again for the opportunity.
Great. And if I could ask Bart.
Hi, I'm Bart Landis. I'm the executive director of the Catawba Lands Conservancy in the Carolina Thread Trail. The Lands Conservancy preserves land, and the Thread Trail connects people to nature. And that's actually our taglines: saving land and connecting lives to nature. We've been in existence for about 30 years. We've got a staff of 20 and try to make sure that our region stays green and everybody has access.
Thanks, Bart. And of course, last but not least, Teresa.
Thank you. I'm Teresa Creech with the Early Learning Partnership of York County. I'm housed actually in conjunction with the College of Ed at Winthrop University. Our goal is early childhood literacy, ready for school, but at the same time, we support social and emotional learning with children. And our board is very active with diversity, equity, and inclusion activities, making sure that children are seeing a diverse group of books, as well as illustrators and authors. And we appreciate the Foundation for the Carolinas, as well as our local affiliate, the York County Community Foundation.
Wonderful, thanks so much. Well, as you can tell, our panel covers quite a variety of different nonprofit fields. We have health, education, the environment, and arts and culture. So really excited to hear the different knowledge that you guys are going to be able to share with us today. So a little bit of a poll to get us started here, but we have quite a few folks on the call, and we'd love to learn how long you've been in the nonprofit sector. So you should see a poll pop up on your screen right now, and if you will go ahead and just click how many years that you have been active in the nonprofit sector. And wow, we have some experienced folks. All right, so overwhelmingly, we have 10 plus years. All right, I'll go ahead and end that. But I'll show you the results here. It looks like we ended with around 60% of folks on the call today have been in the sector for more than 10 years, and a second close with 8 to 10. So a lot of knowledge in the room, and should be a great conversation and opportunity to share that knowledge you've got. So I want to kick us off with one of the questions that we received from a registration. And that question is from Greg at Appseed. And I think it's a great way to start. And can you over communicate with your donor base? And how do you know if you are? So I'll let anyone on our panel go ahead and kick that conversation off.
I have some direct experience. I'll jump in. When I used to work for Davidson College, and when I was at Davidson, I did 2 different things. I was in the development side, and then I was their general counsel for a while. But when I was in the development side, a donor showed up at our office and had a stack of letters with them. And they said, I don't read these anymore. You send me so much mail, I never look at it. That was a sort of a wake up. And we actually did a communications audit. And the people who did it said, yes, you dramatically over communicate with your donors. You confuse the heck out of them. So you can over communicate, and there are people who will come look at your materials and tell you, do this, don't do that.
I also wanted to jump in and just say, that's a great story, Bart. Yes, people will tell you if you're doing too much, and also on the digital side, to look at your unsubscribe rate. Constantly look at that to see if that's an issue.
I would just jump in and say ditto to all that. And I think the most important thing to do is if you thank them immediately, like within 1 to 2 days, either however the way you thank people goes, that goes a way longer than trying to communicate with them every month.
I would also say, I think you have to really look at your donor base, and you have to decide how is it that you actually fund your organization. Not every organization should do it the same way. If you're a small nonprofit, maybe you're more relational. If you are a large nonprofit that just deals with just constantly sending out things, I would agree, like being on that end as a recipient from a lot of organizations, I don't want to see all that in my mailbox either, or my inbox. So I think you just need to, maybe even poll some of your donors and say, what makes you want to give? I think they would appreciate being asked that question. And if you said to them, would you rather, I just contact you once a year personally, or would you rather I send out one invoice? Or, I think you just have to look at it as per your organization. Where's your money coming from?
Great. And I think that's an answer we hear a lot in the nonprofit sector, which is kind of, it depends. So we know it differs from organization to organization. So really important to kind of have that background knowledge of where we're coming from and how it can be perceived differently in different organizations. And since you guys are all in these kind of different ideas of a nonprofit, but you're all very experienced. So we got an interesting question from one of our younger students who's on the call studying to be in the nonprofit sector. What is one piece of career advice that you would go back and give yourself?
I'll take that one. I think to always be open to new experiences and not think that when you're young that you have your life totally planned out as to where you'll go. I started in public policy, then I went into banking, then I morphed into a super volunteer, and from there I came into this space, and I've been, for over 20 years in the nonprofit space. So I think that when you get to my position, I now look back and my public policy experience paid off, my banking has paid off. And being a volunteer has paid off because now I have perspective from a lot of different angles. So just always know that where you start is not necessarily where you will end.
I love that you mentioned super volunteer. I think that is a great word, but also a really great way for some of our younger people who are participating to get involved in the nonprofit community and see what missions speak to you, what kind of work you really enjoy doing.
I've got really mundane advice on that. Learn accounting.
That's a good one.
Yes. Another best piece of career advice that I received, and I had seen other folks do this, not saying that I did this because I never have done this, but never mess with the numbers. I've been in organizations where people try to mess with the numbers to make it look something that it actually isn't, but the numbers are the number, is numbers, they're the truth, and to never mess with that. And absolutely on accounting part.
Great. And we have a couple questions talking about the experience you've had at your organization with the COVID-19 pandemic. So one of the questions kind of centers on fundraising during this really uncertain time. How are you sharing your mission right now? And do you have any creative tips for virtual fundraising?
I'll go against the grain on that. We had a very successful capital campaign during COVID. And it's because we did it the old school way. We met one-to-one. You know, you had to ask, are you willing to meet? But we asked and they met and we raised a heck of a lot of money. So I would say, first off, don't think that you have to do it differently because of COVID. Secondly, I would say that in that same time period, we dramatically increased our social media presence, which we had been wanting to do, and then we suddenly had to do. So we did sort of two ends of the spectrum. One is the one-to-one meetings, and the second is a heck of a lot of social media.
I'm with Bart on that too. I don't think people are interested in virtual fundraising. I think we're all zoomed out, and I think it's just so important to have relationships and one-to-one relationships. And I think if COVID has taught us anything, is it's taught each of us individually to look to see what's most important and get rid of the stuff that's not. And I think Bart's right. I think we raised a heck of a lot of money because people realized we were important and that we had relationships. And so I think that's our COVID learning is a lot of us have peeled back things that weren't important and focused on the things that were.
For us, we leaned a lot into our storytelling about how our investments are helping people in the community, whether it's health and human services or mental health, all these different things. So we've leaned a lot into our storytelling work, as well as to what Krista and Bart said, relationships, one-on-one meetings, as well as even a simple thank you note. Thank you for supporting us and our work. And I say we haven't had virtual fundraising events. I've been to many, but if you do it, it's important to make it engaging and participatory as possible.
Absolutely.
Because yes, everyone's doing
it. And Teresa, what has your experience been in the education sector there?
Yes, I would say that, well, we've always been very heavy on one-on-one relationships. And that is really what assisted to carry us over and to be successful during COVID. You know, if you filled out enough PPP applications, you were busy. But I also think that, you know, just looking at return on investment, we're a very small nonprofit, and it takes a lot of time and money to do events, in-person events. And so for quite a while now, we have concentrated on more of that storytelling and going to our donors and saying to them, this is what has impacted the early childhood sector during COVID. And so this is where we're needing assistance. This is what we're seeing with the families in our community. And I think that just that one-on-one discussion really has been helpful because people have been very generous. The donors have been very generous during this time.
That's great to hear, and certainly a trend that we've seen across the sector as well. And we've kind of talked about how building these relationships is critically important for being a leader in the nonprofit sector. So in addition to that, what would you say are some of maybe the top skills that you think someone leading a nonprofit organization should have or work to develop?
I think we all would say flexibility, right? You've got to be able to pivot. But I think you always have to be able to look ahead. You've got to have a lot of forethought and planning and look ahead. You can't stay stagnant very long. You know, you're already planning for that next board in your next fiscal year. You're already planning for the next budget. Yeah, well, let's see what everybody else says.
I think that you have to take risks and think outside the box. I think that we call it imperfect learning, that it's okay to fail. It's okay to try something, it doesn't work. It's okay to lay it to rest and not worry about it. But also I think people have to be able to trust you, whether it's your employees or your donors or your constituents. People have to be able to trust you so that you can get more for your buck, whether it's your patients trusting you or whatever. And I would say the one thing that is a pet peeve of mine is when people say I'm so busy. So I try not to ever say I'm so busy, because dang, isn't everybody busy? I mean, just don't tell me that.
For me, I agree with what Teresa and Krista said. Also, I think about being transparent, being accountable, empowering those around you, whether it's your board, your staff, donors, to support the work that you're doing, and future focused. Teresa hit it on the head. Being future focused is really, really important, because you don't want to be stuck in the firefighting, as I call it, the firefighting mode all of the time, because it's exhausting.
Jesse, once again, you'll find that this is true for me frequently as I think about things very differently. But one of my pet peeves is also one of the best skills for nonprofit leaders. Nonprofits, almost all are small. There's, the only ones that are big are hospitals and colleges. Everybody else in the scheme of the business world is tiny. And unfortunately, what that causes is tiny thinking, finite thinking. And I don't think you should. If you believe in your mission, think big, be aggressive. Tell people your vision and set that bar really high, and they'll come with you. But if you say, I'm really busy and I can't get to that, and we just need a few more dollars, well, they might give you a few more dollars. But if you say, if you give me $1 million, here's where we can go, they might give you $1 million. So think really big and inspire that same vision in other people, and don't think of it as, oh, we're small, we can't pull that off.
Absolutely. We've got a question from Stephanie at the Charity League of Charlotte, who asks, how are we going to engage our general membership and donors post-COVID? So do you guys have any plans for kind of that reinvigoration of relationships?
Let me tell you an event story. I hate events. I really do. And one of the first things when I came here was with the board's help, we had a task force. We did an evaluation of all of our events, and our lead development person did this huge spreadsheet, and they put all the costs and all the receipts and all that kind of stuff in. And we also added staff time and estimated the amount of staff time. And we had a bunch of events, and we took them down, and in the lower right-hand corner, we had the sum. Everything we made from all these events. And the answer literally was zero. It summed to zero. So we had spent a huge amount of staff time to raise money with events and came up with zero. Now, let me say that the reason I thought of that is that frequently people don't think of events as fundraisers. They think of it as engagement techniques. And as an engagement technique, they can be great. And we can't wait to get back with our donors because we haven't been able to see a lot of them for a long time. And we've snuck in a couple of events at mostly summertime when people could be outdoors and stuff like that. So we do actually have a new plan. It has far less of the big events than that old plan that I told you about has more small events, local, very targeted to certain specific groups. And we really want to have that person-to-person interaction because it's been missing in COVID.
That's an excellent answer. And I would say ditto. Because it goes back to relationships again. And what you're saying is you're going to have small events and small times together instead of a big, party where you make maybe, $100 or something.
Yeah, for sure.
What are some tips you have for managing relationships with donors?
So I'll jump in with that. Of course, again, having those face-to-face meetings, thank you note. But I think one really important thing that we have learned, have doing and continue to do, especially now, is to have those honest conversations with donors about the direction that we say the Arts and Science Council is moving in. And sometimes if those donors don't see that as our our priorities, their priorities even more, it's okay if they leave.
All right, so a question from Amanda at Right Moves for Youth. Do you have any creative suggestions for online fundraising at a time when people can't experience your mission? So maybe let's shift this question, since we talked about online fundraising, to how are you sharing your mission right now with donors?
I think that goes back to the stories piece, right? Telling stories, and whether that be on social media, whether that be, by an email sent out. We've really beefed up our social media as well, Bart. I know you mentioned that. And you don't know, sometimes you don't really know with all the algorithms, right, what's catching somebody's eye. But we do have stories and instances of where people have been drawn to us because of a certain post. So I think you just have to be very aware of the work you're doing, what you're wanting to highlight and profile. And for us, we know if you put, people in the community and you can tag them in some way, or businesses, I mean, people love that. They love to see what's going on in their local community.
I think that's great. I also think we have two fundraisers. They're basically letter writing or campaigns at Christmas and in May. And we received, I think in the last 2 years since COVID, some funds from people we've never seen before or met, and even in different states. And I think when you talk about the social media presence, it doesn't necessarily always have to be new content. But for instance, we have an annual report that is more of a magazine, really, a 16 or 18 page magazine that tells our stories, what we did the whole year, not just that lists the name of donors and volunteers, but also, human interest stories people want us to read and know about. And so if you put, then you can take that whole document and put it on social media, on your Facebook or on your website, then you start getting a presence in places that you don't even know about, and people that you've never met. And in the last 2 years, definitely, when you increase your social media presence, you end up getting funds from new donors. And it doesn't take a whole new story. You can just tell that same story in different places.
Sure. Great, thanks for that information. Storytelling is, I think, so important in this sector, and something that every organization can benefit from, devoting more resources to figuring out how to best tell our stories. And I think another trend we're seeing now is a lot of partnership and collaboration opportunities. So I'm curious to hear your experiences in developing those partnerships and collaborations, and kind of that line of when is it a good idea versus when am I kind of creating this extra work for all of the organizations, and how do you balance collaborating in the community?
Well, since our name is Early Learning Partnership, everything that we do is in collaboration with other organizations. And so we are not a direct service provider, so we collaborate with other groups to get our literacy materials out and our advice for families. And I think you just have to make sure that it always stays within your mission. right? You can't be everything to everybody. And we've been down that path where we have tried to be that. Krista, at one time, we ran a children's free clinic, uninsured children. But we were always a literacy organization. And so we've really stuck to our strategic plan. That's a standing committee that we have that reviews each year and make sure we're not veering off path. And I think as long as you're constantly keeping that in your vision, what it is you're doing, and it might make it seem that your organization's smaller, but what that means is there are other people out there you can collaborate with that are within that exact mission of what you're doing.
I agree with that. For ASC with collaboration is that it's mutually beneficial and that it aligns with the work that each organization is doing. One example that I think about as a great example of collaboration is when we received CARES Act funding for creative individuals as well as small to mid-sized organizations. We partnered with Hugh House and Charlotte is Creative. And so Charlotte is Creative and Hugh House were wonderful in getting the word out to local creatives about this, about getting CARES funding. But ASC, they knew ASC had the infrastructure and the experience and expertise and the mechanism to do the grant making and to provide those funds. So that was a great example of collaboration and really leaning on each other's strengths even more for the greater good.
This was, excuse me, implied in a couple of the answers, but not only do you need it to be mission centric, but you also need to actually have the capacity for the additional work. Frequently you'll say, oh, that's a great idea. And then you think, well, who's going to do it? So just be cautious.
That's awesome. Thank you, Bart, for saying that, because capacity is key. Is to what Teresa said. You know, you can't be a yes organization all the time because you have to think about your team and really taking care of the team, and that we all are humans. We're not machines to just keep grinding out work.
Great. And talking about capacity, we've got a question from Stephanie at the Charity League. How are you guys hiring right now? What does recruitment look like for your nonprofit? Any best practices or strategies there? Websites you post on?
We've had, in the past, we've had great success, and we have had a position open for almost 6 months and not had any success at all. So the recent set of circumstances has been very difficult.
I think for us, we're actually in the middle of doing an interview process for a director position. So this is the first time I think we've ever done LinkedIn and Indeed, and kind of being intentional about you know, where we want to show up and the types of candidates that we want to have in the pool.
We're not hiring. There's two of us. There's always been two of us. Yeah.
We are not hiring either. We don't need to. And I'm afraid to say that out loud because I need to knock on wood. But I will say, to maybe a different way to answer that question is, how are you keeping people? And I think we've all learned, and I think it's important for us to learn in the nonprofit world, that just because we work in a nonprofit doesn't mean we have to, you know, put on sackcloth and ashes. I mean, that's just kind of not the purpose. And so I think what we've done here is we've paid everybody at least makes $15 an hour, which is, you know, that started 2 years ago when we said, you know, minimum wage should be $15 an hour. So we definitely make that happen. And then, you know, we did give a cost of living raise, which, you know, nonprofits don't always get. Like, we're not usually privy to that. But then if you can't offer people financial, what we've learned is that paid time off and other kind of opportunities can be just as important, if not more important, to folks. It shows you care, and it shows that you're listening. And, you know, we're in healthcare, so we've not missed a day of work since COVID started. So, you know, we've done some healthy lunches. We had Spirit Week. which was really great for morale. You just have to think outside the box and making sure your folks know that they're absolutely so important.
I agree with that, because for me, caring for my team is really important. Kind of to how Bart was saying around capacity, because ASC, we have lost a lot of staff or had rounds of layoffs the last 2 fiscal years. So for me, I continue to be open and honest and transparent with the team about what is going on, support them. I did close the last week of December, never done that before, but again, people have not had, they needed that time off because we had been through a lot. So doing things like that and just being open. I even had one-on-one lunches with each member of the team just to check in and see how they're doing and feeling and thinking about everything that's going on.
That's great to hear, and certainly, requires extra work from the leadership team, but has that payoff in return at the end of keeping your staff enthusiastic about the mission and able to best perform their job. So another question we've got kind of about staff from Anne Marie with the Parkinson Association of the Carolinas. What are your best practices for managing an intergenerational staff? Have you noticed any differences? Is there anything important you'd like to share there? You are all smiling at this one, so I'm feeling like there's some good stories.
I think we all look like we're about the same age. So
Well, we actually, since there are just 2 of us, we are basically in the same time period, but we do have interns that come in frequently because we're housed at Winthrop's campus. And, I think it's just, I'm so impressed with the young people, and I do think the younger people, but I also know that people are people, right? So I don't like classifying things generationally, because I know that it just doesn't stick. We have an intern that if I could hire her full time, she is amazing, and she has helped us make our game so much better. But I've also had some that aren't so great. So I think that's the same with adults, right? I mean, when you get a resume in and you take a look at it, and if you have an interview with them, you go, ooh. So I don't know. Intergenerationally, to me, it's once again about respect and communication across the board, and understanding they don't have the life experience that you do. But you don't have the expertise that they have in some areas of life experience as well. So I'm not into generation bombing. I'm just,
Yeah, and I think we can learn, I know I have learned from people that are older than me as well as younger than me. I don't have all the answers. I don't know it all. That's why I lean on my team. That is a mix as well. And I just believe at the end of the day, yes, we're running nonprofits, but more importantly, we are running a business. And so it's really important for our team members for us to guide them along and understand, well, we can't pay for that because the money isn't in the bank yet, or, things like that. So I agree with Teresa. I don't like to, generation bomb, but we can all learn from each other. But setting the expectations from the beginning and holding people accountable and responsible, for me, is key for anyone.
I agree with everything that's been said. I also have an interesting story that illustrates the difference. We had a staff retreat, and part of the retreat was some questions that we knew were actually sort of controversial amongst the staff about how we express our mission. And one of them in particular, we talked about for a very long time with a good bit of passion. And it resolved for me to a question of mission creep, because they wanted to express some things that we actually don't really all the time do. And we went round and round and round and round and round. And I finally said, do you think that if we just said the magic words, people would be in a better position to understand us? And they said, yes. So they thought it was all in the messaging and not in the doing. And that was sort of the opposite of me and my thinking, which is all in the doing. And that, you have to message, obviously. Storytelling has clearly been a big part of this, but it was very clear that they had a very different view of how we address the world.
Yeah, and I think we can segue some of these answers into a couple questions we've gotten about board management. So the listening and respect that you mentioned, Krista, is of course really important when we're working with boards as well. And a question that we've got from Adam in the chat box is, how do you keep board members engaged? What are you doing now to get more out of your board members?
That's a great question, especially with COVID. We are in a medical clinic, so we've not wanted folks to come in unless they are a patient. And so we've had to really be creative about how to still have them involved, because we're Zooming for our board meetings. But we've kind of taken them one by one, and we've said, board member A is really good at accounting. And so we really need to, meet them at a coffee shop or whatever it is I'm making that up. But I will say that we have a physician on our board, and she's really into mindfulness. So we actually had her come in and do mindfulness activities, even though she's an OBGYN, for our patients, for our staff, at a safe distance when we could do that before Omicron. But and we'll have her back. But I feel like you almost have to take them individually right now, and and hone in on their expertise and their interests. It may not just because you're an accountant may not mean that your interest may be something totally different. But to take them one at a time and really gauge their interest, for sure. It's hard right now. I will say that one thing, I know one of the thoughts and questions everybody worries about their boards and how to manage their boards and how to whatever. But when I first started in this field, had no nonprofit experience. And I had somebody tell me one time that we have to get away from the staff, executive director, board being an hourglass where the board's up here and you're here and then the staff is here. We have to get away from that, and we have to be a triangle instead of an hourglass. And that visual has stuck with me for these 10 years, is that I don't need to be in the room if one of my staff want to talk to a board member. That should be really natural and should come natural. And I don't hold that. I'm not the gatekeeper to the board. And so when that can happen, I think that helps all the management parts.
Yeah, I love what you just said, Krista. It's like breaking down these silos and these barriers for access. I'm very blessed that I have a board chair that works with me. It's in lockstep with me. I have a board that is engaged, and it is going one by one. And I think it's also going to them and say, can you help me with X? And here's why I need your help. This is how you can help us solve this problem, and you have the expertise to do that. So that has helped us a lot. And also kind of mixing the board meetings up a bit. Yes, we're meeting virtually with our board, but when I became president, took this idea that when I was on another board of a friend of mine, a mission moment, really continuing to connect our board to the mission of the Arts and Science Council. So in every board meeting, I have a section called Mission Moment, where yes, I'm telling the story, but I'm also backing it up with data through the grants process to help them better understand how those decisions are being made, how equity plays a lens in that.
One other thing I was going to say too, that Krista just reminded me, is we have invited and have done this for years. Once a year, a staff member will come to the board meeting. So we have a staff member at each board meeting to just listen in to see what the board even does.
Yeah, I would say we've really changed how we have board meetings. Since we had to go to Zoom primarily, we have now, there's less of me talking as the executive director and reporting on things. And what we now do is we provide more space for the board members to report on things. We've created work groups instead of committees. And in those work groups, it might be an education moment. It might be, and I don't know, it might be at the end, we have breakout groups. We kind of have a work group where the whole goal is to take care of our mental health and the care about our board members. And so while we're still telling you the business of ELP, what we're really doing is trying to make connection with each other. I did a survey with our board after the year after COVID, and people were like, oh my gosh, we just want connection. I want to know about you, right? And if you've got a board member that it's maybe their third year, but they've only been in person 2 or 3 times, right? Because COVID hit, they don't really know each other. And our board comes from our entire county. So we have really focused on spending time to know each other. And we send everything out, in an e-packet. We do it early. People have the opportunity to read or not. But they're committed to the organization, I think, because they know each other. And we are a team because of that. And my executive committee was great with helping come up with that plan. So
Echoing some stuff that's already been said, the best way to engage a board member, or really anybody, but a board member, is to give them a specific task, not a general one.
Right.
Don't say, I need you to raise money. Say, I need you to go see Mr. Smith and ask for $100,000. A very specific task, that's engaging.
Absolutely. Great. Thank you for all of that input. And I will pivot to kind of a fun imagination question. But if you had a magic wand and could wave it and fix one thing about your organization, not even fix, change one thing about your organization, what would it be?
I'll go. To have a dedicated revenue stream to support the arts and cultural sector, so that everyone is supported in an equitable way, and organizations as well as ASC can hire staff that is needed to do the work.
I'll say that too. Just change the name of the organization.
Yeah, it's not fair, but I was just going to say more money.
Sure.
Land is expensive. We've got an opportunity for a piece of property that's just incredible. It's a $50 million piece of property.
Wow. I would say though, it would be nice if funding came in, more multi-year funding opportunities. That used to be kind of a thing. It wasn't, not the majority of funding was not multi-year, but it is exhausting, just the constant. I mean, okay, where did that money come from? Where was I last year? Where should I be next year? And that is very draining. And then also we always hear this piece that why do nonprofits operational costs are not supposed to be supported, right? Like we're not supposed to give you any money for staff, but we still want you to hire all the staff and do it all. So I think just an overall understanding that nonprofits are small business. We're just business with a different focus.
Can I add real quick? You said something that I love, and we've talked about this as well. Like, yes to the multi-year funding. We convened a group of creative individuals, just hearing, again, listening and learning about their needs. And one person said, if we could get multi-year funding from ASC, because every year I'm applying for a cultural vision grant to continue to expand the work that she got, cultural vision grants for the past 2 years. And to your point, when she was talking, I said, yes, that is exhausting. Like, we know your work, you've proven the value, cut the check and give it to you and let you do your work.
Thanks.
But yeah, thank you for that.
Mhm.
Krista, anything you want to add to that?
Well, I would say ditto to the operating expenses. I mean, we cannot run our clinic, and none of us can run anything just with 100% volunteers. I mean, you can, it's just, we,
No, you can't.
we have, I mean, I
No,
guess
you can't.
you could try, let's say you could try.
Okay.
But I mean, it's important. You've got to have the operating expenses, and I probably write 20 grants a year, and maybe 2 are general operating expenses, and I'm grateful for them for sure.
I just want to add one more thing about operating. I always tell a story, people, a lot of times funders want the end product of, oh, well, the kids got the ballet shoes. Well, it really takes either a person or a team of people doing the work on the back end to getting the sizes of the children and ordering the shoes and making sure it's the quality of shoe that's needed to take ballet. And those individuals need to be invested. It's a lot of resources to be able to get to the end product. So that is why operating dollars are so important, because it allows us to do the work.
So
Absolutely.
in the for-profit sector, I think it would be insulting, right? If you recommended that that's how a business run their business.
Yeah, so pretty resounding agreement on that question. That some of the most significant challenges we're facing in this sector is kind of a public awareness campaign of what nonprofits do and how they work, and then also how do we have sustainable fundraising and income sources. So certainly challenges that I think the sector will probably continue to face, and I'm sure that the 30 of us in this room can figure it out, right? Well, we'll get that solved. But in addition to those, are there any other challenges you see in the sector, and are you doing anything to address those, or do you have any thoughts?
This is a little off topic, but at one point we had, and I thought it was FFTC that did this, I'm pretty sure. It was a county by county breakdown of the amount of money put back into the county by nonprofits. So either by employees, or, I mean, it was a percentage of how many people work in the nonprofit sector, and then how much money goes back into the community from the nonprofit sector. And I thought it was really helpful for folks to see. It's like 10 to 12% of the population in North Carolina work in the nonprofit sector in some respect. And like Bart said, mostly small nonprofits, but hospitals and universities are included in that. And that is we are a huge piece of the pie, I think. And I liked that breakdown. It was really helpful for me to go to donors and to others in my county to say, look, this is how much money goes back into Rowan County because of the work we do in the Rowan County nonprofits do here.
And I think that number nationally is around, it's between 8 and 9% nationally, the amount of nonprofits that work across the country. And I mean, that's not small, that's a lot. And you consider the fact that that's really the safety net, right? We're the ones in the gaps.
Right.
Yeah. Or in our case, we're trying to promote early learning as opposed to remediation down the road, which we know is so much more expensive.
That goes to me to the question Jesse asked, which is challenges. And I think one of the biggest challenges is educating. What I frequently tell my staff is their first priority is to educate, because without that education, nobody cares what we do. They just don't. They think it's nice if they hear about it, but they don't really have any idea why it's so important to them and their quality of life and all that kind of stuff. So educating people about what we do, why we do it, why it's so important is really a very, very high priority. And sometimes other than the storytelling, so all that storytelling stuff that came early on, it often doesn't get addressed.
Great. And Krista, I love that you mentioned earlier having those mission moments. So if you think about your mission moments, what keeps you coming back to the mission you're doing? What's the best part about your job?
I think the best part about my job is that I keep going back to my own story of how growing up in Augusta, Georgia, I was the only person of color taking ballet classes, and how I don't want that to be the case for future generations. And so the importance of representation, the importance of serving everyone in Charlotte Mecklenburg, across the community, and not just, for example, a geographic space like Uptown Charlotte, brings me back every day. And that we really want to, I guess, shift ASC to be from the bottoms up, community level, instead of top down. That's what inspires me every day in the mission of the organization.
How great. Yeah. I'd love to hear all of your responses to this one.
I've been a healthcare provider forever, and I have always worked in hospitals, but when you work in a nonprofit, it's sort of this perfect marriage between being a medical provider, but helping people in need. And it's just, there's every day a story of somebody who's diabetic, who was, unable to get their insulin for 3 years and in and out of the hospital, to now working full time and going to school or whatever. And so we have these stories every day, and it's just a privilege, really, to come to work every day and to be able to see that. And yeah, like Teresa said, just the safety net of that, where would that person be without us?
Now, I'll piggyback on that. I think you can look at what you do in a lot of different lenses. And for me, I look at it as I'm really passionate about early childhood. I think that everything that happens beyond in life, whether that's relational, whether that's academics, it all depends on early childhood and how, is it because you were born in a certain zip code, right? Or is it because you came from a place of means or not, or the color of your skin? And some days it is as joyful as getting a shipment of brand new children's books in, and you sit with your colleague and you read them and laugh at them, and you can't wait to get them into the hands of children and their parents and their families, because you're just hoping to provide opportunity, right? It's about providing opportunity, and there's just nothing as good as that.
I'd echo what everybody said. The reason people go into nonprofits is because of the mission. And so accomplishing the mission is what is so exciting and gratifying. What's hard about being executive director is you have to do accounting, you have to do fundraising, but accomplishing the mission is why you're here in the first place. And it's really great when it happens.
Great. Well, I think that is the perfect way to wrap up our conversation today, talking about what brings us back to this kind of work, the passion and the motivation that we have in order to support and help better our communities. So really just want to thank all of you for coming out, for submitting your questions, and for sharing the knowledge that you have about your work in the nonprofit industry and how we can all work together moving forward and maybe address some of those challenges that we discussed as well. So, have at it.
I'm sorry,
Krista.
I had one little thing. I just wanted to thank you, Jesse, and also the FFTC team. I've never been in a Zoom where there is bonds, but you all work together. It's an example of teamwork in getting that handled. So I just want to thank you, and thank you to the FFTC team of how you handled it.
Well, thank you. And leading into Foundation for the Carolinas, I would love to connect with everyone we have on the call here today. If you haven't had a chance to learn more about the Foundation's resources and how we can help support your organization and nonprofit, please do reach out to us at the Center for Nonprofit Sustainability. We'd love to learn more about your work and see how we might be able to connect. So with that, thank you all for participating today, and we hope to see you at another program soon. Thanks so much.
Great, thank you
Thanks
all.
all.